My aunt didn't call. She ambushed me with a text that landed like a slap. Please don't come. We want a peaceful family event. 10 seconds. That's all it took for my cousin to love the message. Like my absence was the only gift they wanted. I stared at my phone, feeling that quiet internal snap, the kind that doesn't make a sound but rewires you completely. I typed back. Perfect. Truly. They thought they were cutting me out. They didn't realize I was the one holding everything together. And when I stepped away, things began to fall apart fast. But the real shock, it wasn't the text they sent, it was what they'd already planned behind my back. I wasn't always the person who could reply perfect to being erased. There was a time when that kind of message would have hollowed me out for days. Left me replaying every conversation, every gesture, every moment I tried to prove I belonged. Growing up in Santa Fe, my family ran a boutique vineyard called Ruiz Mesa Estates, a place that looked idyllic from the outside: sunlit terraces, curated tasting rooms, hand-painted signs promising warmth and heritage. People loved the story of us. They loved that we looked like the kind of family who laughed through dinners and supported each other through everything. But inside that beautiful facade, roles weren't chosen, they were assigned. Mine was simple: handle everything, fix everything, carry everything. My Aunt Celeste, the matriarch in everything but paperwork, was the kind of woman who treated expectations like commandments. Her voice never needed to be loud. Disappointment was her preferred weapon. She could dismantle you with a sigh, rebuild you with a task list, and call it love. Her daughter, Lila, grew up as the vineyard's golden child. A spotlight followed her without her having to earn it. She had that effortless charm people mistook for kindness, and every small accomplishment was celebrated like a revelation. Me, I was the dependable niece, the one who knew how to quiet storms before they formed, the one who filled gaps without being asked, the one who got praised for maturity because no one bothered praising me for anything else. My own parents were barely fixtures in my life. My mother had left the vineyard years ago after growing tired of my aunt's dominance. And my father traveled so often for work that he existed mostly in postcards. So Celeste absorbed me into her household routines, treating me like both an extra pair of hands and a reminder that responsibility should never be questioned. By 14, I was organizing harvest schedules. By 16, I was designing brochures, answering emails, smoothing over vendor disputes. By 22, I was essentially the operations manager, just without the title or the salary. I told myself it was fine, that helping the family meant being part of the family, that contribution meant belonging. But belonging, I eventually learned, is not something you can earn. It's something given or withheld by people with the power to make you visible. And in my family, visibility was reserved exclusively for Lila. Whenever she wanted something: a weekend trip, a redesign of the tasting room, a last-minute event, Celeste would look to me, not to ask, to announce. "Elara will take care of it," she'd say, often without glancing in my direction. And I would, because saying no felt like breaking a rule I didn't remember agreeing to. There was only one person who ever acknowledged the weight I carried: my grandfather, Mateo. He was a quiet man, gentle in ways that made people underestimate him. He never raised his voice, but his silence was intentional, not timid. He spent his days among the vines, pruning and tending, always humming some melody he never named. Whenever I found him, he'd hand me a basket or a tool, as if inviting me to step out of the chaos. "You don't owe them everything," he'd say while plucking leaves with a calm precision. "You don't owe anyone everything." But I was too young to believe wisdom could be that simple. Instead, I believed effort would fix everything if I worked harder, stayed longer, gave more. Eventually someone would see me, appreciate me, choose me. Grandfather saw the truth long before I did. Sometimes he'd touch my shoulder and sigh, like he could see a burden forming that I wouldn't shrug off until it crushed me. Years passed like that, each season folding into the next, with me running the vineyard's veins from behind the scenes. I learned payroll, event logistics, vendor negotiations, the kind of strategic planning most people went to business school for. So when the family decided to hold a 50th anniversary gala, a massive, over-the-top celebration meant to honor the vineyard's history, it was obvious who would handle everything. I built the entire event from the ground up, coordinated designers, negotiated contracts, handled deposits, created a theme that reflected the vineyard's heritage, made sure everything was flawless. Celeste took credit. Lila took compliments. No one took responsibility. Still, I stayed quiet because that was my role, and I was good at it. But little by little, things began to shift. Not loudly, just subtly enough that I almost missed it. At planning meetings, Celeste would interrupt me mid-sentence. Elara, let's not complicate things. Lila began making decisions behind my back, forwarding them to me with breezy texts. Can you update everything? You're better at the boring stuff. Then came the ultimate slap wrapped in silk. They hired a publicist to elevate the event's profile and introduced her as the person who would now manage communications. A job I had been doing for years. A job they gave someone else. Publicly. Without warning. Without acknowledgement. Without an ounce of discomfort. When I approached my aunt about it, she smiled with that cool detachment she reserved for moments when she wanted to remind me of my place. Elara, you already have so much on your plate. Let someone else shine. Shine. As if I'd been hoarding the spotlight I was never allowed to stand in. My grandfather noticed the shift before anyone else. One afternoon, we sat under the pergola behind his house, the vines heavy with late-season grapes. He passed me a glass of iced tea and said, quietly, "They're pushing you out." I tried to laugh it off, but the way he looked at me sad, knowing made something cold settle in my ribs. "They think you'll keep doing the work even if they erase your name from it," he added. "They think you've accepted this as your destiny." Destiny. What a strange word for a life built on obligation. The weeks leading up to the gala were the tightest I'd ever felt, every interaction strung with tension that hummed like a wire pulled too far. Lila complained about every tiny detail. Celeste micromanaged decisions she never cared about before. They whispered when I entered rooms. They sent emails without including me. Plans were made in corners I no longer had access to. And through it all, I kept showing up, kept giving, kept believing that once the gala happened, maybe, just maybe, they would acknowledge what I'd carried. I didn't know the truth yet. Not fully. Not until the moment they decided to cut me out entirely. But the signs were there. The quiet exclusion, the sudden secrecy, the subtle rewriting of my contributions, and my grandfather, bless him, kept trying to warn me. "Elara," he said one evening as he closed the vineyard gate, "a family that depends on your silence will never protect your voice." I didn't understand what he meant. Not until the night my aunt sent that text. Not until Lila hit the heart emoji. Not until everything I had built for them began to unravel. And I finally saw I was never part of their celebration. I was just the machinery behind it. Replaceable, leverageable, invisible. But I wouldn't stay invisible. Not after what they had planned. The pressure that made those roles impossible to breathe in. Because once my aunt and cousin realized I would never push back. But they didn't just rely on me. They expanded what they believed they were entitled to take. At first, it was small, almost invisible. A missing receipt here. A change to the floral order without telling me. A vendor calling to confirm the update I had never made. I'd show up at the vineyard office and find Lila sitting at my desk, casually flipping through binders I'd spent months assembling. "Oh, relax," she'd say, not even glancing at me. "You're so territorial. I'm just checking things." Mom wants the stage backdrop to look more modern. It's already approved and installed. I'd reply. She'd shrug, then uninstall it. Just like that, as if labor and money were endless. As if my time belonged to her. Celeste encouraged this shift. Of course. She'd beam at her daughter in meetings. As if every impulsive idea were a stroke of brilliance. Let her explore her creativity. My aunt insisted, even as Leela's decisions derailed months of planning. Explore her creativity. With my wallet. My hours. My sanity. But it didn't stop there. The first real line they crossed came wrapped in politeness. Celeste announced one afternoon that she wanted to add a pre-gala VIP luncheon for donors and longtime vineyard members. It meant a new venue, new catering, new decor, new scheduling, basically an entirely separate event 2 days before the gala. A luncheon wasn't in the original plan. I said carefully, "Well, now it is," she replied, handing me a list of demands. "You can manage it. You handle everything else." I took a breath. There's no budget left for an extra event. She waved a dismissive hand. Then move things around. Cut something. You're good at making things appear out of thin air. That line hit harder than she realized. Because she meant it. She truly believed my resources were bottomless. When I resisted, she grew irritated. The way she always did whenever I stopped behaving, like a tool, instead of a person. "Elara, you're being difficult," she said sharply. "We're trying to elevate the vineyard's image. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my chest. But it stayed there thick and burning. The second line they crossed was intentional. A week later, I discovered a private group chat between Celeste, Lila, and several board members from the vineyard. I wasn't supposed to see it. Lila accidentally left her tablet connected to the office display screen. It flashed open during a presentation. I didn't even need to scroll far. Elara is too controlling. She takes things personally. Maybe we should shift responsibilities to Lila. It'll reflect better on the brand. Agreed. Elara can do the back-end work. Quietly. Quietly. As if the work I did was valuable only when hidden. As if my existence was better tolerated than appreciated. I didn't confront them. Not yet. But something inside me shifted, another string pulled too tight. Then came the third line, the one that made everything snap. It happened on a Tuesday evening when I stayed late in the vineyard office, reviewing contracts to finalize remaining payments. My grandfather stopped by with a small container of food he always worried I forgot to eat when I got overwhelmed. But this time, his face carried something heavier than concern. "Elara," he said softly, "your aunt approached me this morning about transferring some of the estate's old reserve funds into the gala budget." I frowned. Reserve funds? The emergency account. That's for vineyard upkeep during drought season. Yes. He nodded. And she said you agreed. My stomach turned. I never did. He exhaled slowly, his eyes full of a sadness that made me feel suddenly cold. "I know. That's why I came to you first. Something isn't right. They're planning things without you. About you." His words echoed the warnings he'd given me before. But now they carried urgency. I checked the financial software. My password had been reset. Reset. By someone with admin access. Meaning Celeste. Meaning they'd tried to go around me for money that wasn't even theirs. That was the moment the pressure stopped being subtle. The strings weren't tightening, they were actively strangling. The fourth and final line was the text. But before that moment, there was another humiliation, small, quiet, but razor sharp. Lila called a family meeting to review final seating arrangements. When I arrived, the meeting had already happened. The decisions already made. The updated chart already approved. No one told me the time changed. I said, confused. Celeste looked directly at me and said, Without flinching, we assumed you'd figure it out if it mattered to you. Then Lila held up her screen, showing a new group chat, one I hadn't been invited to. "Oh," she said, smirking. "We moved the meeting. Did you seriously not see it? Everyone else was there." Everyone else. There was a beat, a long, hollow second, where every unspoken truth settled into place. They weren't forgetting me. They were removing me. Deliberately. Strategically. Cruelly. And then, the next morning, my aunt sent the message that would change everything. "Please don't come to the anniversary gala. The family wants a peaceful night." 10 seconds later, Lila Hart reacted. A like, a quiet digital stamp of approval. A confirmation that my erasure was not accidental. And in that moment, clarity hit me with an almost frightening calm. This wasn't a family falling apart. This was a family closing ranks without me. They thought the worst parts were finished. But they didn't know what they'd triggered. They didn't know what I still controlled. They didn't know I had already begun pulling back silently. Carefully. Piece by piece. And the real turning point was still ahead. The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It arrived quietly, delivered through pixels, wrapped in false politeness, backed by months of whispering that I hadn't realized were rehearsals for my removal. But before the text came, before the like that sealed my erasure, there was one last moment where everything could have been different. One moment where they could have chosen honesty instead of humiliation. They didn't. It happened during the final walkthrough of the gala venue. I showed up early, clipboard in hand, rehearsing the mental checklist I'd been carrying in my head for months. This was supposed to be the final piece. The place where all the stress finally turned into a finished vision. But when I arrived, the atmosphere felt wrong. The decorators were already taking orders from Lila. She was standing near the stage, wearing one of her effortless linen dresses, pointing at arrangements I had approved weeks ago. "No. Move those. Mom wants the orchids instead. The whole vibe should be more elevated." The head decorator tried to protest, but Elara requested. "Elara isn't managing this part anymore." Leela cut in. "Just follow the updated plan." Updated plan. A plan no one told me existed. I approached them, forcing calm into my voice. "Lila, I wasn't aware of any changes." She didn't even turn toward me at first, just flicked her hair over her shoulder. Like the conversation bored her. "Oh, right. We're going in a different direction now. Mom said it was time for a younger, fresher perspective." My breath caught. And when was anyone planning to tell me this? She lifted her tablet, tilting it toward me casually. "There's a new group chat. All decisions go through there. You weren't added because, well, you take things too seriously. It's easier this way." Easier. There it was again, my exclusion framed as efficiency. I stepped closer. "This entire event is under my name. My contracts. My responsibility." Lila rolled her eyes. "And you're being dramatic again. We're trying to help you by taking some pressure off." Help? Their favorite word for control. Before I could respond, Celeste swept into the room like a director entering a set. "Oh good. You're both here," she said, taking a quick look at the altered decor. "See, Lila's ideas are perfect. Much more aligned with the vineyard's branding." I forced my voice steady. "These changes weren't discussed with me." Celeste blinked slowly, the way she always did before dismissing anything inconvenient. "Elara, you don't need to be involved in everything. Let Lila shine for once." For once. The phrase burned, because she'd been shining on work I'd done my entire life. "I'm not trying to stop her from contributing," I said carefully. "But these decisions have financial implications. We need consistency." Celeste's smile vanished, replaced with thin-lipped irritation. "You're creating conflict where there doesn't need to be any." "No," I said quietly. "I'm setting boundaries." She stiffened. and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not reflection, fear. Fear that I was stepping out of the role she'd carved for me. She turned away from me, effectively ending the conversation. We'll finalize everything without you today. Go home. Elara. Rest. You've done enough. But the tone said something very different. You've done all we needed from you. You're no longer required. I left the venue feeling hollowed out. Not angry, just eerily clear. Something was shifting, and it wasn't coming from me. And then came the final blow. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A single message from Celeste: please, don't come to the anniversary gala. The family wants a peaceful night. No explanation. No gratitude. No acknowledgement of the months I dedicated. Just erasure clean. Effortless. Deliberate. 10 seconds later, Leela reacted to it with a heart. A heart. A digital applause for removing me. I stared at the screen as something inside me fractured, not loudly, but decisively. If I had to describe it, it felt like the moment a violin string snaps mid-performance. A sharp silence. A sudden shift in the room. And then, clarity. Cold. Steady clarity. Not only had they removed me, they had rehearsed this moment. The secret meetings. The reset passwords. The private group chats. The decisions made without me. They had been preparing for a gala that showcased everything I built without inviting the person who built it. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't thoughtlessness. It was a plan. A coordinated, intentional removal. I reread the message again, letting every word settle. Please don't come. Drama-free night. Peaceful. My presence was the drama. My existence was the obstacle. My contributions were valuable, but only when I stayed silent. I typed back the words that marked the end of who I had been. Understood. Perfect. But in that moment, something else woke inside me. Not revenge, not yet. Just a decision. If they wanted a night without me, they would get exactly what they asked for, and everything that came with it. What they didn't realize was simple. They hadn't removed a burden. They had removed the person holding their entire event together. And what falls apart when support is withdrawn is always louder than the snap that begins it. I didn't respond with paragraphs. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg for clarity or permission or acknowledgement. All I sent was understood. Perfect. And for the first time in my life, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It settled around me like something sacred, a space where I could finally hear my own thoughts instead of their expectations. They believed removing me from the gala was the end of the story. But it was only the end of their version of it. Mine was just beginning. Because here's what they seemed to forget. Every contract, every invoice, every reservation, every authorization, every emergency clause, every approval was under my name, not Celeste's, not Leela's, mine. The shift started quietly, sharply, like sliding a blade between threads. I opened my laptop, pulled up the event spreadsheets, and for the first time, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt methodical, the kind of calm that comes when someone finally understands their power. Line by line, vendor by vendor, I reviewed what I had built and what I could dismantle. There were dozens of agreements. Some required 72-hour notice to cancel. Some needed written confirmation. Some carried penalties, but all of them tied directly to my signature. A family that erases you never expects you to hold the pen. I began with the lighting company. My email was clean, professional, cold in a way only truth can be. Due to changes in internal planning, we will not be moving forward. Please cancel the installation and halt any pending charges. Next, the caterers. This message serves as formal notice of cancellation under Section 4B of our agreement. Do not prepare or deliver any items. Do not charge the remaining balance. Decor team. audio technicians, furniture rental, tent extensions, stage arrangements, transportation services. I didn't offer explanations. I didn't mention family drama. I didn't hint at betrayal. This wasn't vindictive. It was administrative. Straightforward. Neat. Efficient. I wasn't destroying the event out of spite. I was simply withdrawing what was mine. The infrastructure they'd mistaken for theirs. The labor they assumed would always be free. And as the emails went out, a strange peace filled my apartment. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Not vengeance. Just alignment. Like I'd stepped back into the shape I was always meant to occupy. Then came the financial protections. I contacted the vineyard's accountant, someone who had known my grandfather for decades, and informed him that the emergency fund needed restricted access immediately. Only two authorized individuals, me and my grandfather. He didn't question it. He'd seen the way my aunt operated. He'd seen the strain my grandfather carried in silence. Within an hour, the account was locked down. No transfers. No withdrawals. No special exceptions signed under pressure. My aunt wouldn't discover this change until later. Much later. When it was far too late. But the hardest email, the one that steadied my pulse, was to the event venue. Hello. This is to inform you that Ruiz Mesa Estates will not be hosting the anniversary gala on the scheduled date. I am withdrawing our reservation and all associated services due to internal restructuring. The venue manager called me immediately. Shocked but respectful. Ms. Ruiz. The gala is in less than 2 weeks. Is everything all right? Yes. I said calmly. Everything was more than all right. Everything was finally honest. Around midnight, there was a knock at my door. Only one person knocked softly like that. My grandfather. He stood in the hallway. Hands clasped. Shoulders sloping with years of carrying a family that rarely carried him back. He walked inside without speaking. Sat on my couch. Exhaled slowly. And for the first time, he didn't look disappointed or tired. He looked proud. Elara. He began. I know something happened. You don't need to tell me unless you want to. But I want you to hear this clearly. You were never meant to hold this family together by yourself. I swallowed hard. I'm done holding them at all. He touched my hand. Gentle but certain. And that is the first real protection you have given yourself. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with relief. I heard them discussing the gala. He whispered. They think you're gone. That you stepped aside quietly. They don't know what you're doing now. They don't need to. I replied. He nodded slowly. When they come home, we will be ready. We? Not I. Not him. We? For once. I wasn't standing alone. The internal transformation came slowly. Then all at once. The part of me that used to shrink gone. The part that used to anticipate their disappointment, silent. The part that believed belonging was something I needed to earn, dissolved. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel unstable or emotional or angry, the things they always accused me of whenever I dared to push back. I felt grounded, aligned, steady as stone. I wasn't punishing them. I was protecting myself, protecting my grandfather, protecting the integrity of everything they'd taken for granted. They had built a life on my compliance. Now they'd learn how unstable a foundation that truly was. By morning, the power shift was complete. Every vendor had responded. Every service had halted. Every financial channel had been redirected or locked. Every contract was either canceled or waiting for their signatures they didn't have the authority to give. The gala still existed on their calendar, but only as an illusion, a ghost, a memory of something that would never happen. And when they returned home, expecting gratitude, obedience, and flawless execution, what they found instead was the cost of mistaking me for someone who would stay silent forever. Airports at dawn always feel like liminal spaces, half dream, half reality. But that morning, as my grandfather and I waited near the arrivals hall, nothing felt dreamlike. Everything felt painfully, sharply real. Travelers rolled suitcases across gleaming tiles. Children cried. Friends reunited. Life pulsed around us with casual normalcy. But for us, this was the moment the truth would finally meet the people who had spent years running from it. Our attorney, Daniel Mercer, arrived exactly on time, crisp gray suit, organized folder, expression steady and unreadable, the type of calm that made chaos shrink in its presence. He nodded politely. Elara, Mr. Ruiz, everything is set. The documents are prepared. The notice is finalized. And they'll have no legal right to touch the emergency funds anymore. My grandfather let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped for years. Good. Today needed to come. I looked toward the sliding glass doors. My pulse steady, not racing. Not trembling, steady. Like I had finally entered a version of myself I'd been trying to become for decades. Are you nervous? Daniel asked. No. I said truthfully. I'm ready. Because I wasn't showing up as the fixer or the peacemaker or the family buffer. I wasn't here to absorb anything. I wasn't here to explain myself. I wasn't here to give them another chance to make me smaller. I was here to end the cycle. For myself, for my grandfather, for the legacy they had twisted into something unrecognizable. Then, they appeared. The family arrived. Celeste led the group with her usual sharp-shouldered confidence. Sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, she wasn't willing to remove even indoors. Lila trailed behind, rolling an oversized suitcase plastered with pastel stickers, her version of rebellion. My uncle Marco and his wife Clara looked exhausted, probably from pretending everything was perfect during the trip. They spotted us, slowed, then stopped completely. Celeste's eyebrows knit together in confusion and immediate irritation. What on earth are you doing here? She demanded. We already arranged a car. This is unnecessary. We're not here to pick you up. I replied. Lila scoffed. Then what? Elara going to guilt trip us for wanting a peaceful event? I didn't flinch. Her confidence faltered. Daniel stepped forward. Good morning. My name is Daniel Mercer. I represent Elara and Mr. Ruiz in matters concerning financial misuse and unauthorized access to protected family funds. The entire family froze. Shock rippled through them like a wave. Celeste blinked rapidly, confusion twisting into anger. A lawyer? What is this? Daniel handed her an envelope. Legal documentation regarding cancellation of event contracts and financial protections now in place. You'll find itemized details inside. She took the envelope but didn't open it. I don't understand what this is supposed to mean. We had agreements. Plans. I met her eyes. You had assumptions. Not agreements. The documents. Daniel spoke evenly. Professionally. All contracts for the anniversary gala were under Elara's authorization. She has withdrawn them. All payments have been halted. Additionally, attempts to access the emergency vineyard fund without Mr. Ruiz's consent were flagged and redirected. Marco stepped forward, face reddening. That fund was for the vineyard, my grandfather answered him. Clearer than I'd heard him speak in years. That fund was for emergencies. Not to finance a party. And definitely not without my knowledge. Celeste snapped her attention to him. Dad. Stop. You're misunderstanding. Someone must have confused the accounts. No one was confused. He replied. You tried to bypass Elara to access money that wasn't yours. Leela crossed her arms. Voice sharp. Why are you acting like victims? We were trying to create a celebration for the vineyard's future. For our family legacy. For your image. I said quietly. Not for the vineyard. Not for us. Her mouth snapped shut. The crowd gathers. A few travelers had slowed their steps. Watching the scene unfold, Celeste noticed them and flushed, nothing horrified her more than public imperfection. "Can we please stop with this spectacle?" she hissed. "You're being dramatic." "Elara." I stepped closer. Voice calm. "Dramatic would have been showing up at the gala you uninvited me from. Dramatic would have been exposing everything in front of your guests. This is accountability." Daniel gently handed another envelope to Lila. "And this," he added, "is documentation of the attempted transfer from the emergency fund. Account history confirms that only 2 individuals have never withdrawn from it, Mr. Ruiz and Elara." Lila swallowed, cheeks warming. "I didn't take anything. I just mentioned the idea." Mom agreed. "We needed more resources. And you plan to take them from a man who spent his entire life protecting the vineyard when no one else did," I said. Celeste's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous. We weren't stealing." "No," Daniel corrected. "You were exploiting." Silence hit harder than shouting. Celeste's stare flickered between me, Daniel, and my grandfather. Finally, she exhaled sharply. "What do you want from us?" "Elara, an apology." I shook my head. "No. I want distance. I want autonomy. I want you to stop treating me like a resource instead of a person." Marco rubbed his face. "So you're just cutting ties." "I'm setting boundaries," I said. "It's different." The breaking of their delusion. Lila stepped forward, eyes glossy with anger and something else, fear. "So you're punishing us?" "No," I replied. "I'm protecting myself. You removed me from a celebration I built. You tried to use funds that weren't yours. You acted like my absence was a relief. Now you get exactly that, my absence." Celeste grabbed the envelope and finally opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Then her face drained of color. What is this clause? These penalties? These notices?" Daniel nodded calmly. "You're legally obligated to respond within 10 business days. Failure to do so will escalate the matter. Until then, you are barred from accessing the protected accounts." Her hands trembled. "This could ruin us." My grandfather answered her with a steady voice. "No, your choices did that." He stepped beside me, placing a protective hand on my back. "I won't let you lose her the way you lost your integrity." Celeste sucked in a breath like she'd been slapped. Clara whispered, "Maybe we should all calm down." But the truth was already out. There was no undoing it. The final boundary. Celeste really looked at me for the first time in years. "Elara, what are we supposed to do now?" I held her gaze with a clarity I had earned the hard way. "You'll figure it out. The same way you expected me to." Daniel nodded to signal we were done. My grandfather linked his arm with mine. We turned to walk away. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Out of freedom. Out of self-respect. Out of a life finally shifting into balance. Behind us, I heard Lila whisper. Voice cracked. "Mom, what do we do?" Her mother didn't answer. There was no script for a world where I didn't bend, where I didn't fix, where I didn't carry everything they dropped. But I wasn't theirs to manage anymore. I didn't look back. Not once. In the weeks that followed, the vineyard felt different, quieter, lighter, almost as if the land itself was exhaling after years of pressure. Word spread quickly that the anniversary gala had been canceled. Some people called, confused. Others whispered, trying to piece together a story no one in my family dared to explain. I didn't offer explanations either. Silence became my new boundary. And surprisingly, it protected me more than any argument ever had. The fallout. Celeste tried calling once, just once. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a careful blend of indignation and desperation. The voice of a woman scrambling to maintain control without a script. "Elara, we need to talk about how to move forward. This affected all of us. But she didn't apologize. Not really. Not for uninviting me. Not for erasing my work. Not for trying to access the emergency fund. When someone can't say the simplest truth, their words become meaningless. Lila didn't call. She sent a single text, "I hope you're happy. Everything is ruined." I didn't reply. Because nothing was ruined, not for me. The only people facing consequences were the ones who spent years believing they were immune to them. Protection. Finally, my grandfather and I met with Daniel again. Mostly to finalize the protective measures around the vineyard accounts. For the first time ever, the emergency fund had clear, written boundaries, 2 authorized individuals, transparent oversight, quarterly reviews. It wasn't just money we were protecting. It was dignity. It was legacy. It was my grandfather's life's work, finally shielded from people who treated it like a personal wallet. He looked healthier these days, less weighed down, less watchful, less resigned. One afternoon, while we sat on his porch overlooking the rows of vines he'd tended for decades, he said quietly, "You didn't just save yourself, Misha. You saved what matters." Hearing that felt like sunlight warming something in me I didn't realize had gone cold. A new direction. With the gala officially dissolved, I finally had real time to ask myself a question I had avoided my whole life. What do I want? Not the vineyard. Not the family. Me. The answer surprised me. I realized I didn't want to keep fixing dysfunctional systems. I wanted to build spaces where people didn't have to survive them. So I applied for a position at a local nonprofit that provided advocacy for older adults, people like my grandfather, who often slipped through the cracks because their families believed support was optional. During the interview, when they asked why I wanted the role, I didn't tell them about the gala, or the text, or the years of invisible labor. I simply said, "I've seen what happens when the people who care the most are heard the least. I want to change that." They hired me a week later. Stepping into that office for the first time felt like entering my real life, not the one assigned to me. Not the one shaped by obligation, but one I chose. Rebirth. On a quiet Sunday morning, my grandfather and I walked through the vineyard together. He moved slower than he used to, but there was a steadiness to him now, a peace I'd never seen fully settle in his eyes until all of this was behind us. "Elara," he said, stopping beside one of the oldest vines. "You carried too much for too long." "I thought I had to," I replied. He shook his head. "No. You were just the only one who cared enough to do it right. Caring is a gift, but only when it's shared. When it's taken, it becomes a wound." I looked out across the vineyard, beautiful, imperfect, alive. A place I once believed tied me down, but now simply existed as a memory of who I used to be. "I'm not carrying them anymore," I said softly. "I know," he replied. "And look how tall you're standing." For the first time in my life, I felt it, that freedom people talk about in stories but rarely feel in their bones. A sense of beginning. Not after destruction, but after clarity. My family's choices didn't define me. My boundaries did. And walking away wasn't abandonment. It was rebirth. If you've ever been the one who carried too much, who stayed too long, who loved without receiving love back, I hope you know you're allowed to step into the life waiting for you beyond their expectations. If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're listening from and share your own experience. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today.